with all of those data being recorded, a single chart can't possibly expect to capture all the important things that are happening, say, in a department of a business, forget like a whole division or the whole company. So even if we make simple and consistent visualizations that convey valuable insights, is there a risk of information overload if we place a whole bunch of visualizations in the same place at once? And so, like, are there strategies on an organizational level, or guidance that you have for us on how we can perform data storytelling at the right level of detail at a given time?
Yes, I think it starts with the audience and what they care about, right? So no matter what you're visualizing, you're hopefully trying to answer a question or a couple of questions for a specific audience. And that's where you start. So let's say your audience is a group of people who cares about this specific topic and the question and the questions that they have about that specific topic. Well, that's the beginning of your data storytelling journey. You now have answers to to those questions because we're talking about multiple charts here. Let's say they care about the sales, the profit, the category that's performing the best, and because it's the same audience, it's like a team of management that cares about their company numbers. So you start with the questions and then you go to your data and you provide answers, right? So before you even start visualizing anything, you start providing answers. And those answers are going to be your titles for each chart. So, for example, if sales have decreased for the last quarter, okay, that's your title for one chart. After you've gone through that process, you've got your questions, you've got your answers. Those answers are now titles for each chart. Then you go on and you create those charts that support the information that visually explain the story. And then you use color on top of all that to really drive home the point. And the one thing I'll say here is when you're using more than one visual, let's say more than one chart in a dashboard as an example, you have to be really careful with using colors consistently.
Mm.
And I see this misused almost every single time. It drives me mad. Like people participate in these data viz competitions and then they post all of their like submissions. And some of them are amazing, right? Like, but the beginners, the number one thing I see them doing wrong is, let's say, going back to our example of sales by category, you have three categories. And in your first chart, you're showing sales for those categories and you're using red, green, and blue. Great. Now you're showing
I mean, they're using red and green. That's not great. Come on.
whatever. You're using blue. You're using three good colors, okay? And then in chart B, you're also talking about the three categories, and now you're talking about the expenses for those categories. And
Yeah.
now you're using red, green, and purple for some reason. And now people already learned that category C was supposed to be blue, and now you're using purple. That can really throw people off. And it just confuses them. So being consistent throughout the entire process is so important. Even if you introduce new data points, let's say now we're not talking about categories, we're talking about regions, you
Mhm.
still should not use the colors that you used. Let's say if you used yellow for one of the categories, don't use it for one of the regions. Even though it's a different data point, that same color creates a connection in people's minds.
Mhm. Um, so you must have loved my book, Deep Learning Illustrated, because we painstakingly had color consistency across the code, the
It's so
equation in
important.
the text,
Yes.
and in the visuals. So, like, the variable y, the outcome in a
Yeah.
machine learning model, we have that blue, the exact same blue throughout all of our figures, all of our equations in the textbook, and all of our code examples.
And I think that's brilliant. It brings me back to one more point where people are like, "Well, I'm trying to spice it up. I'm trying to keep things interesting, right?" And they also do that with backgrounds for data visualizations. Like for chart, they'll put like a pink background or I don't know, a dark blue background, whatever. And it's because they're trying to do something different.
Mhm.
Well, my thinking it goes back to like reading a book, right? You don't see publishers of books printing on slightly, shades of pink and blues and purples throughout the book, um, because the whole point here is for people to read the text, and the best way to read the text is with a white or white off-white background. Same thing for data visualization. Like we don't have to just get creative for the sake of spicing it up. Be intentional.